want people to see the work that modern day apostles are doing in the kingdom.
Every true Christian is sent. It's just a matter of where.
Jason, thank you so much for joining me on Apostle Talk as we talk about the pour over and what the pour over is and you and everything that you're up to. So thank you so much for joining me on Apostle Talk.
Absolutely excited to be here. Appreciate the invite.
So to begin with, I want to give just a quick explanation for those people who aren't familiar with what Apostle Talk is. The whole point of this is I want to shed light on the work that people are doing in the kingdom. You know, we all have the great commission as Christians, right? We're supposed to go out and we're supposed to serve God. We're all sent. The question is, how are different people sent? And so that's what I want to talk about. I want to lift up the work you're doing with the pour over, talk about what the pour over is, but also the hope is that somebody who's watching this or listening to this can be inspired and, well, how can they personally serve God in their life? They don't, so many people, when they think about serving God, they think, well, I've got to work at a church and my paycheck has to have a church on it, but that's not at all what needs to be done. So on that note, what is the pour over for those people who haven't experienced it?
Yeah. So the pour over, it started as a personal exercise, and it is, but has grown. And the idea is it's summarizing current events, the biggest news of the day, the news that you're already going to hear about. It's not the most spiritually significant news, but just the biggest, most visible news of the day. And then we summarize it in hopefully a politically neutral way, and then pair it with brief biblical reminders. So the idea being, hey, let's not have a political ideology be shaping how we're viewing these events, but let's have our relationship with Christ, and let's try to view, hey, who cares how a Republican or how a Democrat should respond to this? How should a Christian respond to this or think through this event?
I love it. One of the things that we see so often, like there are Christian publications out there, but all they talk about are things that are either related to the church, that are happening in the church, or happening to evangelists, or happening, etc. And I love the fact that, we're supposed to live in the world, and the world is happening all around us. And so I love the fact that the pour over does such a good job of sharing current events, but doing it in such a fun way. So I have open. So the pour over can be experienced for those that are watching. You can either get the email blast or you can do the podcast. Are there any other forms of it?
You can, if you follow us on Instagram stories contains all the news, but it's our newsletter's the biggest. The podcast is a well-produced audio version. It's the same content, and then it's repackaged somewhat for Instagram, but yeah.
So, like, for example, this morning you have losing streak. Wall Street clearly wasn't ready for school to start again. And then you talk about the fact that the stock market fell for the fifth straight day yesterday, continuing a losing streak, started mid-August, was wiped out much of the summer's gains. But your voice, I love just the satirical, it's very light, but it's there. But then at the bottom, verse to consider when refreshing Robinhood or Instagram or ESPN each morning: set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Colossians 3:2-4. So cool.
Thank you. And really, I mean, that's great. I appreciate you doing this, because it's a great example. Like, hey, we aren't telling you as a Christian, here's how to process this or handle this. It's just saying, here's what happened, and don't separate this from Christ. There's a lightheartedness, because a lot of the time, one of the things that we try to hammer home, and we really only hammer home like 4 sort of Christian points, and one of them is keep an eternal perspective. Like
Yeah.
this feels like there are things that it's like, oh my gosh, the whole world is focused on this thing, and it's such a big deal. And like when you zoom out and say, will I remember this in a week, in a year, in eternity? And the answer is usually no. And so to say like, hey, it's good. I mean, we're still writing about it, so obviously we care somewhat, but saying, hey, let's just put that level of care in its appropriate place. Like this matters. We want you to be informed about it. It's way, way, way tiny less important than most things.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that uh the news, the standard news, this is the biggest thing in the world. You have to pay attention to this. The world is falling apart. It's like all news is so dramatized and
Hmm.
over the top. And yes, there are some things that are significant that are happening, but in the big scheme of things, as a Christian, what does it matter? I love that.
Yeah, it's a hard balance, because like you're saying, and like we're trying to say, it's good to be informed, but right now it feels like the options are, you kind of sell your soul to a political ideology, and part of what they're selling is that dramatization and the fear, the anger, whatever, that gets you really bought in
Yeah.
to continue following the story. And it's like, hey, you're going to hear about this, and so here's what's happening. But we want to try to just take a step back and say like, hey, you know what, as Christians, we're actually called to love this person that you probably think is an idiot in the news. And we don't go any farther than saying that, like, you need to figure out what that means, but hopefully it just shifts the posture and mood, and it makes it so there's both that, like, hey, if you're drinking from the fire hose, here's an opportunity to step back. If you've stopped drinking from the fire hose and are like, I hate the news, I can't handle this
Yeah.
at all, like
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
buried my head in the sand, it's like, well, hey, I understand, I get why you did that. We believe it's not best the best response of Christians to be uninformed about what's happening. So it's like, here's a way that you can dip your toes in the water and be aware of what's going on in the world without having to drink from the fire hose and getting a breaking news update every 15 minutes.
I can't remember who said it, but I remember a pastor associating the fact that a Christian needs to have in one hand the newspaper and in the other hand the Bible, because
Hmm.
that is the life that we exist. And what you've done at the Pour Over is you've done a great job of kind of tying those two things together, which I think is really cool. So uh, we're going to transition in just a second to talk a little bit about more you personally. But so for
Yeah.
those people, how can they get connected with the Pour Over? How can they subscribe to it, and how can they support the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So it's free. You can go to thepourover.org, THEPOUROVER.org, and subscribe to the newsletter. That's, like I said, the biggest medium. We have a couple 100,000 subscribers. You can also just look up the Pour Over on any podcast platform and listen to it. So those are the two ways.
Excellent. So now I have to hit on one element that you clearly, I mean, this is the first time you and I have spoken and interacted, but clearly you have a passion for coffee.
Love coffee. Yes.
Clearly. I mean, so let's talk about that and tying it together. I also do love the fact that you are
Yeah.
showing off the Iron Sheep mug. So cheers. Gunk.
Cheers. Yes. So I got the Iron Sheep mug, and I'm drinking the coffee that you
Yeah.
you sent as well. So it says handwritten Rwanda on the bag. What am I drinking here?
So I have always had a passion for coffee. There was a point where I wanted to actually start up a coffee roasting business, and I bought
Mm,
a professional coffee roaster. Uh, and I'm from Seattle originally, and I actually grew up. My parents, back when there was only like 3 or 4 Starbucks, they would buy bags of Starbucks for Christmas and mail it. So my first recollection of coffee was sitting on my parents' bed, wrapping bags of coffee. So
mm,
that smell, everything about it. And then through my undergrad and through my master's, I've worked at different coffee shops. So I love coffee. but then I realized that I don't, as an entrepreneur, as an individual, I don't want to roast coffee for other people. I want to roast it for myself.
Hmm.
I want to
Yeah.
roast what I want to drink, because to do it as a business, you have to be able to replicate it and mass produce it. And New York State is horrible with the number of restrictions. This is just nuts. And I know this is a
Hmm.
tangent, but in order to roast coffee, you have to have a level 1 food handler's permit. Uh,
Hmm.
your daughter, who, congratulations, she's what, 2 months old now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's fast forward 5 years from now. She can bake cookies and go and sell them at the farmer's market, and that's totally fine. But I can't roast coffee without having a level 1 food handler's permit in New York. So
Yeah.
um, the
So you'd
point.
have to really commit.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's a huge tangent. The point being is that it's now one of those things that I love to just roast coffee that I love, and then give it to friends. So there you go. So that
Well,
is,
thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. And this coffee in particular, from Rwanda, is one of my favorites. Ethiopian is by far my favorite, but this batch that I recently got of green coffee, I enjoy a lot. So now let's tangent back to the pour over and how
Yeah.
you tie that in the name. We've got to explain what a pour over is, but then the fact that the theme throughout your podcast and throughout the newsletter is that you have shots, you have pour overs, you even have whipped cream. So explain what that is.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit gimmicky, but we've leaned into it, and I mean it started with, like I said, this started as a personal exercise, um and so there was no real thought put into. I didn't want to spend time on the name, and so I think we originally called it. I call it like hot black coffee, and it was like it's going to like 10 friends that are holding me accountable to try to process the news in a Christian way.
Yeah.
And so then as it started growing, someone's like, hot black coffee, we need to change this. And so there was then I didn't come up with it. One of the friends did, and he's like, the pour over, it's coffee themed. You read it in the morning or you listen to it in the morning. There's like, it makes it feel a little bit more thoughtful, like pouring over the news. And so then like we had it and ran with it. So yeah, our longer stories, and they're the entire email takes 5 minutes to read. So the longer story is 150 words. It's called an espresso shot. We then have in other brews, which is like 50 words, and the whipped cream on top is like total clickbait. Just a single fun sugary whipped cream clip, and there's no chance that you're going to get sucked into a rabbit hole. It's like a single funny gif or image or something on our webpage. You can just go enjoy it and move on with your day.
So this morning's is 1 horsepower is all you need, and that's all I'm going to say. But you should go to their Instagram. It's on Instagram, right?
Yeah. They
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
up.
You got to go see it. It is exactly what Jason just described. It's great. It's great. So a pour over, just as far as the coffee, espresso is obviously understood. Pour over is just another way of making a single cup of coffee,
Yeah.
where you pour water over the
Brewing
grounds.
method.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many brewing methods. But I like it. I like the. It's not too over the top. I like it. It gives some humor to it, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, and it allows us to, it gives us a little bit of fake identity or something. Like we on principle at the pour over hate tea drinkers, and we'll make fun of tea drinkers in some of our emails. And it's like, I mean, I've drank tea, but hey, we're the pour over, so no, you can't put tea in a pour over mug. Like you gotta, yeah. So it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Perhaps if there's a British version that competes with you, they can be like tea time or something like that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
that's
guys
good.
can battle back and forth. But so Jason, and now tying to your answer to this call, like how did you already touched on it as far as this being a personal challenge for you, but as a Christ follower, um, did you feel a call for this? And when did that happen, and how did that happen?
You know, I think a call is a strong word. It's I was frustrated by the news. I enjoy the news. I have a very high capacity for the news. I read the news all the time and don't get angry or fearful. And so there's certainly some uh kind of ability or passion around it. And then I was just frustrated at the state the I was frustrated by the news,
Yeah.
like how the news was presented. And so the first thought was like, it feels like no one's doing this. No one's doing the the biggest, most visible news stories of the day. And I want to say, like, I love and probably would have started a Christian news site if those didn't exist. So like we have nothing but love and support for all the Christian news sites that are doing that well and are often highlighting things of more spiritual value. We're not doing that, not because we think that's wrong, but because we saw a
An
gap
opportunity.
of, yes, of saying like, okay, what about the same news that I'm going to hear about at the water cooler? What's going on in politics? What's going on in business? Whatever, and just and informing in that way, and having it be motivated um by Christ. And what I'll say is like it was a slow road, and only the pour over only exists because me and a couple other people enjoyed doing it. Because for years, like after a year we had like 200 subscribers or something, which is not paying anything. Like the story that I told recently was Mitch, who handles all our sponsorships. So that was when we had reached like 2,500 subscribers. We started trying to sell ads, and he reached out to me and was like, hey, can I get like a Mitch at the pour over email? I'm like, no way, dude. That's $5 a month. Like we can't. The pour overs money is the pour overs money, and we can't afford that. And now it's like we have 11 employees. Most of them are part time. It supports me full time, and it's really grown. But for years, it was, hey, this is something that I'm passionate about, that I think is worthwhile, and helping the people that are reading it, and it's growing. And there was just kind of some proof of concept in the early years, and also really refining the business. And so I think uh that's part of it, is like the calling. I I felt you could call it, the calling was not to reach the masses, it
Yeah.
was not to build something that had 250,000 subscribers. It
Yeah.
was, hey, here's something that like this is something I want to do. It's a need that I have. I read the news, and I'm being shaped by these political sides. What can I do about it,
Uh,
for me? And I think that shift is really important, because in those early years were formative, and like the pour over hot black coffee shifted. Like if you look at our first email, fundamentally different from what the pour over is now. And it's cool to see that kind of shape and take form and then be used. And so having patience to say like, I'm going to be disciplined and continue to do this, and it doesn't need to be big, I think is one piece of strong advice. Like, hey, if this is
yeah.
good, if it's helpful for you, just keep doing it, and be content with it being helpful for you. Maybe it will grow and be used in a bigger way, maybe not, but it is valuable already.
I love it. I love it. So, one of the things that I think is a misnomer is that um, you only serve God if you feel this like, Jason, I am calling you.
Yeah.
You must go and do this. The Blues Brothers. I'm on a mission from God. Like you have to have this overwhelming call, and some people do.
Yeah.
The last person that I interviewed, Rex Keener, is a pastor here in the Capital District, where in his story, he was called at 12 or 13 years old, and it was a very clear, direct, this is what you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
But I love your story in the sense that you wanted to serve Christ. and you saw an opportunity. You didn't want to do something that had already been done. And there are lots of Christian publications that are out there, news companies that do that, and as you said, do it well. So you found a way to provide something that you yourself had a desire for, and you simply answered God's call and saying, okay, well, I have a desire for this. I have a skill set in this. I'm going to do this.
Hmm.
And I think that's really cool. And I think the people who are watching or listening can benefit from that, in the sense that you don't have to have that sky split open,
Right.
clear.
Apostle Paul
Yeah.
road
Yeah.
to Damascus moment.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's yes, I totally, and I for a long time expect, my dad is a pastor. I expected to
Okay.
go into ministry. And so this was there was some like kind of frustration, because like that also, expecting to be a pastor
Hmm.
opens up conversations, like gospel conversations, all the time. And then I decided to get my MBA, and I went and was working in corporate America. And it's like, I've just stopped having gospel conversations. And I realized part of that was because when people ask, like, the reason I was having gospel conversations or conversations about my faith was people would ask me, hey, what do you do? What are you going to do? Whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I had removed Jesus from that. And so there was part of that in starting the pour over as well, is it just provided an opportunity to say, oh, I work for Dish, but I also run this Christian newsletter on the side. And it's like, just being able to say that, and say like, that was helpful as well. And so it's like, again, all of this being like, it was started for selfish personal reasons, and it was not like, hey, I feel this strong ministry calling. It was like, this makes sense and works for me, and helps me with the spiritual, with my relationship with Christ today, with where it's at. And it doesn't need to have a vision to change the world. This is a helpful personal discipline. And it's been so cool that
Yeah.
it has grown into something that does have a ministry impact. But that I did not set out to do that.
So you're saying that it was selfish reasons. I mean, uh,
Selfish is a strong word.
yeah, I don't see it as
personal
that.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my journey, the pour over is what, 5 years old now?
Yeah, four or five.
4 or 5 years old. And you were saying the first year you had 100 people.
Yeah.
And so for me, this ministry of Iron Sheep Ministries is really new. Like, we only officially started as a non-for-profit tax exempt company in April.
Hmm.
But it's a transition that's been a long time in the go, of doing the through the word Bible studies, and then Apostle Talk. We just aired our first one in August. Yesterday,
Yeah.
September 1st, we had one. Now, I don't know when this is going to actually air, whether it'll be October or November. I did record one in Malawi that I was planning to share sometime this fall. So I haven't figured out exactly when this is going to air. And I wish I hadn't said the date of when we're filming. But whatever. It is what it is. The point being is that when I first started doing the Bible studies 2.5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
uh, God just gave me this nudge of saying, you need to learn my word better. Now, for me
Mm.
personally, I owned a video production and photography company. So I had all the background of video production
Yeah.
and all of the equipment. And was starting a master's in biblical studies. And so I started doing these Bible studies, and it was like 1 or 2 followers, subscribers, 10 subscribers, but it was more for me to
Yeah.
study the Bible in the same way of what you're talking about is that it was
Mm.
more for, I want to study the Bible. And I think in the first video I said, if one person benefits from this as well, great. but this is
Yeah.
selfishly for me. And for me as an extrovert and just the way I learn, the best way for me to learn is to study, is to teach.
Yeah.
So I've now been doing Bible studies for 2.5 years. We've done over 100 of them, averaging around 55 minutes each. And I'm also just finishing a master's in biblical studies. And it is amazing for me personally. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I'm not trying to talk about myself. It relates.
Yeah. No,
Um,
this is perfect.
I have actually learned more from doing Iron Sheep and weekly having to teach the Bible than I have
Hmm.
in a master's in biblical studies, which is, both of those go hand in hand. So on the one level, selfishly,
Hmm.
using that word intentionally, I am learning the word, but
Yeah.
God uses that. So in the same way with what you're doing with the pour over, initially it was selfish for you wanting to be able to read the news and digest the news in a Christ-centered, reflective way. But the Holy Spirit is using that. And I think that's what's so cool, is what's building you up individually is now building up hundreds of thousands of people. So
Right.
praise God. That's so cool.
Yes. So cool. And it really, like, we talk about on the team all the time how ridiculous it is, like how many people open an email that we send,
Yeah.
and just the journey, because like there were three of us early on, and we said, hey, this is starting to take up a lot of time. If we don't hit 2,000 subscribers by, I forget the date, we're closing up shop.
Yeah.
And we didn't hit it, and no one mentioned it, and we just kept going. And so, but it was kind of like, this is fun. This is fun. It's profitable for ourselves, and it gives us a purpose, like a purpose and a mission, and it helps us. Like, I have spent just like you're saying, you've spent way more time in the Bible because you've committed to releasing these videos. I've spent way more time reading the news and trying to process and be like, oh my gosh, like I read this and my gut was anger towards this person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we picked our Christian sections in the verses. It's just like, man, when I wrote this, it made me angry at this person, so I'm gonna drop in
Talk
a
about
verse that
anger.
says exactly like, hey, we need to love our enemies. And
Yeah.
it's exactly what you're saying. If it's useful for you, and if it helps you grow closer to Christ, do it. And like, we have so many. The other thing is, could there be anything more boring than email? Like, we are not like a high tech company in any way, but there
Yeah.
are so many platforms and opportunities to do this. And so, like, the business, I have an MBA. I loved the business side of it. And
Yeah.
so that was another kind of outlet. And I love what just kind of the mission of Apostle Talk in general, because the Pour Over is a for-profit company.
Mm.
And part of the reason that we did that, again, like early on, we never expected it to be a profitable company. It was just, hey, we need to incorporate. And a bunch of people were like, you should be a nonprofit. It's like, well, we actually don't. The business model works. Like, we don't need to rely on donations to exist. And I like the business side. We're going to do, and it's frustrating to me that, like, hey, if you're a Christian, it has to be a nonprofit. Like, there are
Yeah.
times, there are nonprofits that like need to be nonprofits, but it goes back to this idea of like, hey, the Pour Over is a for-profit company. We pay taxes and have employees and make money and invest money and all this stuff, and it's mission focused.
Yeah.
Like, it's we're using that space and trying to like run a business in a Christ-like way. It was endlessly frustrating to me through my MBA program that, like, we'd be like, and look at Google, they're treating their employees well, and it's really paid off. Like, they have like great retention and smart people and whatever. So now everyone's doing it. It's like, where were the Christians running businesses that were just treating their employees well because that's what they were supposed to do. Like
Yeah.
like, yes, it's great. And it makes sense that it's profitable, but like, even if it's not, that's how a business that honors Christ should be run. And
Yeah.
so there was a little bit of like chip on my shoulder to say, hey, it can be a God honoring organization and be a for-profit business that doesn't need to rely on donations. Like let's just go out there and prove that we can be a profitable business that loves Jesus, and that it's not like, that's not an inherently greedy, wrong thing. Because if we're generous with the profits and we treat the employees well and do it, like, these
You'll be
things are not
blessed.
mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This was not in my intention to discuss, but I think it's a good subject and a good question, is this non-for-profit versus for-profit business. And it's
Yeah.
fresh in my mind. I do have a board with 2 members on it. And this question kept coming up, is that should we be, it was the exact same stuff that you're questioning. Or that you did question the decision that the path that you went down. And our decision was to go the nonprofit route,
Hmm.
which for me, I've been in business for 16 years, having a video production and photography business. And it has been a very difficult transition because I've always done everything as an entrepreneur. And from a financial standpoint, as far as expenses, as far as everything, I need to completely shift my hat. And now us making that decision to be a non-for-profit. And I think it depends entirely on what the where you feel led. And as you said, there are some businesses that should be a for-profit and some businesses that should be a non-for-profit. Um, so I got a question for you. And this was one of the decisions, one of the thought processes that we had is that if we went down the for-profit route, we'd have to sell advertising. We'd have to get people that
Yeah.
were sponsors for it. That's the only way that you can do it if you're not
Yeah.
through donations. So my question is, how do you pick or how do you get sponsors and selling advertising, knowing that you are a Christian organization? It must in some way inhibit who you want to have advertised, that they also are an ethical business, or how does that come
Yeah.
into it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, and I'll also say, like, all of this, our journey is unique in the fact
Yeah.
that, like, we were volunteers, and so we were able to grow slowly. And if we didn't sell an ad, it was like, well, who cares? I mean, it
Yeah.
costs virtually nothing to send an email. And
Yeah.
so, our expenses were so low and everyone was a volunteer that, like, it was one of the things that allowed us to make the decisions that we made. Now that most of our advertisers have reached out to us, and we turn down, I should go like look at it. We turn down like probably a third
Oh wow.
of the people that reach out, for various reasons, both political and spiritual.
Yeah.
And we evaluate sponsors in different categories. So if it's a Christian organization, then we do some sort of like spiritual review, of saying like, hey, we've had pastors or organizations reach out and we're just like, yeah, like,
It
you're a
doesn't fit.
little, yeah, you're a little questionable. Like, we're not
Yeah.
going to point people to you.
Yeah.
But that's totally different when it's like a secular company selling a product,
Well, like for an example, Element is
Yeah.
one of your sponsors, and I have to say, as a triathlete, I tried their sample pack because of the advertisement that was in the pour over email, with
Yeah.
their you click on it, and I think it was $5. You cover the shipping cost, and they give you a sample.
Yep.
And I'm not doing an advertisement for them, but I totally am. Uh,
Yeah,
I
it's
absolutely love it because it doesn't have any sugar in it. It is just electrolytes. It's just salt. It's a salt-based product,
yeah,
which exactly when you're doing a 50-mile bike ride followed by a run, the thing that you are actually missing is not sugar, it's
right.
salt. Now, sugar is an element that is an instant fuel that a lot of triathletes will use. But as my recovery drink, I will take my large Nalgene, this guy right here, and I will put one of the I really love the spicy ones. The
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's what is it, mango habanero or something like
Yeah,
that. There's
yeah.
a fruity twist. I'll put one in there and I'll put it in the fridge. And when I get back from a bike ride, it is so refreshing. But I only found it because it was an
Right.
advertisement on the pour
So,
over.
but they're actually, and I, hope this isn't a scandal. But like we have had a couple people, like two, maybe only one, reach out frustrated with our sponsorship of Element because part of their branding is that it is salty AF. Um,
Oh,
and so it's like, uh, you as a Christian, and it's like, it's not the only thing they say, but it's like you as a Christian organization should not point people to that. And it's like, I, I understand where you're coming from, but they're a secular organization.
yeah.
If it was a pastor saying my sermons are good AF, then it'd be like, yeah, that raises a flag. I'm not going to
Yeah. Yeah.
promote you. But when it's a secular, it's like, hey, you know what? They're going after. They're not going after Christian triathletes. They're going after triathletes, and they're trying to be provocative and whatever. And
Yeah.
also, if they like spelled out the words, we'd be like, yeah, no, we're not going to be associated. So it's a fine line, but there are two different categories of, hey, we expect a lot more from a Christian brand.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a secular brand that has a good product, and then it's like we're okay promoting things that are edgy or a little bit like an edgy meaning,
Yeah.
so like, and really that is like probably the most provocative sponsor we have, is
Yeah.
some of their advertising has been something that we wouldn't do. And so that's
It's
how we,
tough.
it's a fine line. And
But s one of the things is that Christians so often try to dictate morality. They try to say that, you're not a Christian, but you should still live by the standards of the Bible. It's like, well, if they don't profess to be a Christian, who are we to put those morals on them? Now, the outline of the Bible is what it is for a reason. Sin is sin because it'll mess us up, and God wants
right.
us to avoid it for our own benefit. But I don't think that it's right to go to your coworker and say you shouldn't be doing that. Like, well, dude, I don't even. I'm an atheist. I don't believe anything that you believe. I think it just puts a really bad taste in people's mouth, and it
Well,
doesn't, in my way, in my opinion, reflect Christ.
and that is the space that the pour over lives in. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, hey, we are engaging with culture and saying, like, a big part of, we're willing to take this controversial element promoter, or like
Yeah.
promotion, because we're also willing to say, like, hey, you can love Jesus and be a Democrat, you can love Jesus and be a Republican, and
Yeah.
that's a lot more scandalous for like, there are, and I don't think they don't fall on deaf ears to say, no, this issue is like, you should be unwilling to support a candidate that has this stance that's unbiblical. It's like, I get where you're coming from, but it's a valuable conversation, but to put who you vote for as a requirement of salvation, it's like, that becomes a real issue. To say you can't be a Christian if you are a Democrat, or you can't be a Christian if you are a Republican,
Yeah.
is to say, is to put a 21st century American political ideology on the same level as the gospel. And that's the definition of heresy. I'm not saying there's not important spiritual discussions and issues that and conversations that need to be had, but it's saying, let's step back. Let's keep the big thing, the big thing.
Yeah.
And like this, we're not going to put other things and make them as big as the gospel. We're not going to say this news story is as big as the God of the universe. We're not going to say this sponsor's advertising is as important as the God of the universe. And we're not going to do those things. So it's part of our mission to say, here's how you live in the world without being of the world, and to demonstrate the love and kindness and gentleness of Christ, acknowledging the fact that the world is sinful and messed up. And hey, we're not endorsing. People get upset when we write a story. They're like, you shouldn't. It's like, we're not endorsing this by any means.
We're just talking about what's happening.
Exactly. We're trying to let you know what's going on. We think your response is the correct one, a good one. You should be disgusted by this. You should, but like, that's the world we live in. And we need to have that dissonance of, here's what's going on. Now, how do I respond to it in a way that is, reflective of the Holy Spirit that we have?
Well said. Very well said. And I think that the mission that you guys have is serving just that. We as Christians are called to live in the world, but not be of the world. And so to try to put yourself in this bubble where you're not going to interact with other things, where you're not going to, oh, that's secular, we're not even going to touch it. I don't think it's biblical. I don't think it reflects Christ. We are supposed to be salt. We're supposed to be salty and flavorful. I heard a pastor once say that Christians are like manure. When spread out, it's fertilizer. We do a lot of good, but when together, you stink.
That's great.
So this idea that we're supposed to reflect Christ in everything we do, I just think that it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. And I suggest that everyone that is watching this subscribes. And I do also think that, yes, it is free and you make money off of advertising, but I do think there is an element where, no pun intended there, of product placement for element there. But I do think there's an element of, if you benefit for something, if you want to see it go, invest into it. And so even if it is, and I looked on the website, as far as you can donate even like a few dollars a month, just a small,
you can pay $1 a month. Yeah.
A dollar a month, $12 a year for something that's amazing. Now with 200,000 followers, how would that change things if everybody did that? You wouldn't have to worry about element. You wouldn't have to worry about advertising. Now, I mean, that's not where you want to take the business necessarily,
right? But you're totally right. If everyone paid $1 a month, we would, it again would fundamentally change the business for sure.
Yeah. Well, Jason, thank you. I want to wrap this up. I would like to pray for you, to pray for the pour over. And I would invite everybody who is watching this or listening to join me in prayer. If you're driving, obviously don't bow your head and close your eyes, but if you're able to, please do. Please join us. Lord, thank you for Jason. Thank you for the work that he is doing in the pour over. Thank you that as an entrepreneur, he simply saw an opportunity to reflect you, to provide something for the world that is benefiting him, but that benefits Christians everywhere because of it. I pray, Lord, that you will bless the pour over, that you will bring people to it, that they will find it, that they will be refreshed by it, and that they will, on a daily basis, as they are getting their news, that they will digest it with a Christian perspective, and that will help them be able to do that in everything that they do, in the news, in the things that they watch, and the people they interact with, and how they interact with people, and realizing that everything that we do, we need to reflect Christ. I pray that you will also bless Jason, his family, his 2-month-old daughter, and everybody who works at the pour over. Thank you, Lord, for the work that they are doing. Thank you, Lord, for your love for us. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks, brother. I really appreciate the time. We went over the target of 30 minutes, but hopefully people have benefit from hearing your story and how the pour over came to be.
Thanks so much. This was a ton of fun and a great opportunity.
Awesome, brother. Well, be well, and just know every time you send out a publication, I'll be reading it, and hopefully you gain a few more subscribers from this.
Thank you.
Awesome, brother. Well, be blessed, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Talk to you soon.
Nah.